Hi, friends. Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm your host, Josh Horton. Today I'm talking with designer and entrepreneur Tyler Deeb, the founder of Miscellaneous Goods Company in Louisville, Kentucky. In this conversation, we trace how a self-initiated deck of cards in 2012 turned into a real company, how Tyler survived the emotional and financial roller coasters that came with it, and why he eventually shifted his focus from paper and leather into fragrance. We talk about learning to think like an entrepreneur when you really just want to make good things, and what it means to carry a team and a family through huge swings in the bank account, and how he keeps his head steady through all of it. We also get into his personal principles, not chasing glory, working hard, and being satisfied. We talk about the golden age of social media and what broke, what he looks for in the era of AI, and how he uses AI as a tool without letting it hollow out the soul of his work. If you're trying to build something of your own, and if you feel the weight of money and responsibility on your shoulders, or if you just need to hear someone talk honestly about what a creative life actually costs, this one's for you. And before we get into it, a quick reminder: State of the Union podcast and the Creative Workers Union are completely self-funded. There are no sponsors behind this. It's just us, these conversations, and a lot of editing hours. If this podcast helps you, consider chipping in a few bucks a month to support the show. Even the cost of one coffee a week makes a big difference and helps us keep these conversations ad-free and coming regularly. You can support the podcast at creativeworks.co/podcast. The link's in the show notes. Let's get into it. You find yourself it's Louisville, Kentucky. Is that correct?
Yeah, Louisville. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great town. I've never been up there, but like every time I hear of someone cool that's from Kentucky, they're from your town. Maybe it's the only town in Kentucky. I don't know.
There's,
not.
It basically, it pretty much is. I mean, the next biggest city is Lexington, and that's significantly different. That's a college town. And, although it has a lot of things that you could be proud of, if you're from Lexington, it's a really small town. Louisville's small too. I mean, it's like 1.2 million or so, but it's different. We do things different here. That's like a 20-mile radius for us to gather that many people. That it's like a really big metropolitan. So like it has like this big area that includes people like all the way out in the country. But yeah, people love Louisville. Usually are drawn to it's a very working class city. So it's a place where it's not fancy. It's very like straightforward. It's very affordable, but then there's a lot of great creative that comes out of it. And most of it kind of goes under the radar. One of the like great things about Louisville is like oftentimes the like most famous people from Louisville are like not even well known.
I would love to talk about Kickstarter for a moment.
Well, if you go way back, I mean, I was not creatively inclined when I was growing up. In fact, I kind of rejected the creative arts world just because I very much didn't understand the purpose of it. And so even though creativity, creative problem solving, and aesthetic does come pretty easily to me. So I had access to it pretty early on where I could see it better than other people could see it. To know credit to myself, just so for some reason, I was born with that ability.
You're paying attention.
Maybe. I don't think so. Actually, no, I was super aloof. No.
Really?
I was super aloof. Man, I had like most of my brain turned off all growing up. And that's partly because, I was the youngest child. Also, I think I'm kind of just built that way. Also, I feel like I'm kind of like a low stakes, kind of low, low hum type of a person. But I do have an intense side for sure. So didn't really get into.
What were you into? Like, what are the things you plugged into as a kid? Like you just watch ball? Like do what?
I was not into sports. I played football in high school, but it was more of it wasn't like a passion. It was more kind of fell into it because I was so aloof, like because I was so undefined and yet moldable. I found myself doing a lot of things. Like I cheerleaded for a year and I played football and I played ultimate frisbee. And then I also played lots of video games and I was just into the normal stuff that high school guys are into. And the kind of breakthrough moment creatively when I really did realize that I understood or saw the world differently or could capture it differently was senior year. A friend of mine's girlfriend was doing photography for the yearbook club, and she was at one of the JV football games. Like I told you, I played football, so I was at the game too, just watching the younger players play. And I was like, hey, do you want me to I'll take your camera for a little bit if you want me to shoot. Cause she was totally bored. She wasn't into it. She was like, yeah, sure. I went and took photos, and then, I can't remember his name. Wusher, maybe. It doesn't matter, obviously. He was running the club for yearbook, and he saw my photos and he was like, these are really good. And that was like super crazy because like I was a terrible student and I was like a class clown, and he was a guy that consistently, and it wasn't like a lovely way. He was like not a fan of mine. It wasn't like we had this kind of bad kid, good teacher type of vibe. It was like, no, Tyler sucks. We do not like him in our classroom. And he actually had to admit like that the photos were good. And that did feel good, of course, but it also kind of felt like, oh, like, do I just see things differently? And so from that point on, like out of high school, I started doing photography a little bit more, and then realized that, photography requires so much attention to equipment, and process, that it wasn't really, I wasn't really good at it from like a technical standpoint. Right. And then also I was really bothered by how it felt like I always had to take photos in order to be a photographer. So I felt like I always had to have my camera on me, that I was like doing something wrong by not having a camera on me. And instead of enjoying moments, I was often looking for moments, and right. It wasn't until I met my friend Aaron, who was a graphic designer, and he kind of showed me this path of graphic design, and that became my sole focus. And then I did a thing that a lot of guys did in the 2000s. I started designing posters and doing the gig poster themes and getting really into screen printing.
What was your moniker, or what was your user on gigposter.com?
I want to say Pedale, which I was really into bikes at the time. And I was looking for something bike related that wasn't too obvious. And Pedale is right. Like Italian for like to pedal. So it was super obnoxious. Nice. And weird, but yeah, I loved gig posters. I loved that whole community. I loved that, bands were touring and that you could have access to that world with being a complete outsider and do artwork for these touring bands. And, but then, after a couple of years of that, I realized that, there's not much money in it. There's really not much opportunity in it, right. Except for like a hobby. And that's when I started seeing brands or like businesses or guys like Aesthetic Apparatus and, Invisible Creature and, trying to think of some others, like some other kind of like very heavily gig poster influenced brands starting to get into branding work. And right. That was really exciting to see how people were taking their aesthetic choices and applying them to these organizations. And so I got really into that. And then from there, I got into editorial and just kind of kept on peeling back the layers of graphic design. And that's how I landed, getting back to where you get introduced to miscellaneous goods. That's when I was doing freelance work and everything dried up. And this was really popular. And maybe it's popular today with graphic designers, but it was really popular in like the late 2010s, early 2010s was like self-initiated projects and like things. Yeah. There was like people that were doing like the 365-day challenge where they were doing a new piece of art every day for that amount of time, or like what Dan Casaro did with like the 50 did like 50 illustrated states with his friends and helped kind of curate that. There was all these great people and they were getting like internet fame at the time.
That time. It was
amazing. So fun. I mean, and that was just, so everyone kind of was looking for projects that were self-initiated to kind of launch their design careers. And I was a freelance graphic designer whose work completely had dried up. And I was looking for that spark. And I was like, well, you know what? Like I had bought a deck of playing cards that were custom made. Theory 11 was the brand, and they had like launched this, and it looked beautiful. The packaging was amazing. And I bought it for gifts for friends, and then I unwrapped it. And then I was like looking through it. I was like, oh shit, like they only designed the box and the back of the playing cards. Like they didn't redesign the face cards or the number cards. And I remember, so they had hired a designer who I had looked up to, and hired him to do a deck of cards. And he did a wonderful job, but he only got hired to do the box and the back. And I just thought, man, that is a wasted opportunity. Like you already went through the trouble of printing them, like going through all the logistics, all the cost of manufacturing. Why wouldn't you just go 10% further on the art side? Or, it was more than 10%, but you know what I mean? Like, why didn't you go further and just make it totally new? And that was kind of the seed that sort of was like, well, if they're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so it was my self-initiated project. And it wasn't supposed to be all done within 2-3 months. It was supposed to be kind of like drawn out over a year and kind of posting stuff and maybe never actually getting printed, just having lived digitally. But my work had completely evaporated. So I had all this time on my hands. So I just found myself, and I fell in love with the project too, because it started kind of to build like a language. And I was never an illustrator. So I was kind of practicing all these new skills of illustration. I just fell in love with the process. It was really, really cathartic. And then got it to the end of that 3 months of doing that. And I was completely, totally broke. Literally broke. Out to dinner for my brother's birthday. And, one of the guys with us was just, asking me how I was doing. I was like, not good, man. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm out of money. And he went into the ATM, and he was a wealthy guy, gave me $1,100 and just said, hey, figure it out. And, that's what floated us for a little bit longer. And then launched the Kickstarter for the playing cards with, a goal of 6,700 or so, just to cover the cost of manufacturing, and then ended up raising 146,000 in 30 days. And it was just kind of like, holy shit, what just happened?
This was just at a time too that, really, I guess you're saying this, Theory 11 would have had a box of cards the box itself was done really well, but playing cards now, it just seems like there's a custom deck of playing cards for almost everything. And at that time, there was nothing like it. Yeah, there was nothing like it. And so when you did this, it was incredibly novel. I'm sure custom decks had been done before. I'd love it. You probably even know the history of that, but nothing like this was on the market. And so for graphic designers and people, young, like I was starting a family at the time, and I just wanted to have a cool deck of cards out, for people to play with. And so it was just a no brainer. And I don't think the tiers were very expensive. And so you could get, there was a lot of things that you could get for it all. I felt like, and it was really phenomenal. And then what was the total payout?
Yeah, 146,000. So, and honestly, I undercharged a lot of it, and because I wasn't a business person. I wasn't an entrepreneur. Right. I wasn't even an entrepreneur, really. I was just a designer who had an opportunity to like sell a deck of cards. And that's how Miscellaneous Goods started. It was and then we went through like a lot of years of kind of this transition, or I went through a lot of these years of transitioning from being a graphic designer. And then the first step was like, okay, now you got to start being an entrepreneur. And then you got to be a business owner. And then, they are different roles that you kind of learn through. Like designer likes to make, they like to innovate. They like to create. I spent a lot of years, probably 4 or 5 years, just focusing on designing and innovating. And those were really fun. In fact, just the other day, a guy took a picture of a mirror that I made and posted it. He's like, oh, I love this mirror by Tyler, Miscellaneous Goods. And I looked at him like, holy shit. how did I ever think that was a good business idea? It was an awesome
Right.
product. It was a great expression of creativity and art and all that. But like, I was not wearing my business owner hat when I made that. And that's okay.
Too
Because
expensive? Like what were the things that you felt like?
yeah, I mean, we sold the mirror for $1,200, and that was like, they cost us $400 to make. And most people don't know, kind of like how margins work. When you make a product, you normally want to make at least a 4 times X. You want to charge 4 times what it costs you to make it, usually. Technically, we weren't even charging enough based on the costs. But you have to do that to create sustainable like revenue to support,
Yeah.
all the many factors of running a business. But going back to the design and innovation stage, I mean, that stage is really important, or was really important for me, to one, have fun with what I was doing, creating a brand that people appreciated it, but also trying to kind of figure out what it is, how does business work, and what's the recipe. So it's just like going into the kitchen and really just like making all types of things and saying, what do people respond to? Why do they respond to it? What does a business need to be sustainable? And so, yeah, just this cool transition between that. It took a long time, but I also, was being self-taught the whole time.
Do you feel like you were kind of born to be an entrepreneur, or do you kind of, like what you're saying, did you feel like you were kind of thrust into it through successful making and innovation, basically?
So on my father's side, my great grandfather, his name was Abraham, and he's an immigrant from Lebanon, and he came over in like the early 1920s. One little cool side story about Abraham was that he had a glass eye because when he was like 12 years old in Lebanon, pissed off his neighbor, and an adult man like smacked him in the face with a stick, and it his eye. So he had a glass eye. And when he came to Ellis Island, there was like a rumor, and it was probably based on truth, that they were rejecting people in Ellis Island that were like sick or deformed, or
Sure.
because this was truthfully, it was the United States was trying to create like a new class of working class individuals. And so they needed everyone that came in to be in working condition. Yep. And so he was concerned that his glass eye would be a deterrent. And so he slipped the guy like, I don't know, $20, which was like equivalent to like, $900, $1,000 at the border though. Like he just kind of gave the guy $20, got in. The reason I'm talking to you about Abraham is because Abraham would go on to work in factories for a while, but eventually would become a merchant. And he would travel like up and down the highway selling things. He leveraged all that into starting a restaurant in Shelbyville, Kentucky, and built a pretty significant business and a good basis for his family to kind of grow from there. My grandfather, same, started a business, started a liquor store. Well, he's got a cool story also. He was delivering ice for a lot of years. He was really good at it, and a competitor to where he was working, and literally carrying blocks of ice and hand delivering them from location to people's houses without cars. And you just go back and forth from the ice house. And he was so good at it. He was doing so well with sales that a competitor like offered him like his own personal ice house and his own personal like thing just to sell their ice. And when he was there, he was noticing, the people would come up and like, hey, do you have a drink? Or, hey, so he ended up making a whole store, and it still exists to this day. In fact, Jack Harlow has a part of it in his rap song. It's called Morris Deli now, but it was Tyler Deeb Liquors was how it started. And he sold the business, and he owns the building, or he owned the building until he passed. And then my father, tried to work in sales for a long time, ended up giving that all up and starting his own janitorial business. And And I think there is something about Lebanese in general, people, from what I've understand, that they're very much like merchants and people that are very autonomous and like to be independent and also like to kind of make their own money. Uh, Obviously, I'm third generation that I can look back and see that pattern. Um, and I can see it in my own kids too. So it's cool. I do think I was born to be an entrepreneur, or I think I'm more inclined to have independence and to kind of pave my own path. Um, yeah.
You've never once struck me as someone who's like all about themselves.
Mm.
And so I think for a lot of folks, they've got, especially business owners, those with strong egos, or at least, strong constitutions about their life and what they want. And again, maybe those things aren't exclusive, but you don't strike me as a person who's like trying to make a buck or really trying hard to sell, or I mean, you feel like you're making honest, authentic things, and you always have.
Authenticity and honesty are definitely some of the most important things to me. Hospitality is also way up there. Like, so service, hospitality. But I am trying to stretch myself to be more salesy and more numbers focused right now. I think it's good. I think it's healthy. I think people can find themselves at all different parts of the spectrum. I think it's healthy to look at like, hey, where are my deficiencies, and to run the other direction and try to kind of work against your own tension and try to like actually make progress in, the areas that you're deficient. So no, it is really important to me to be honest, to sell honestly, to do it ethically, and like that's top to bottom as much as we can, like controlling the supply chain to make that sure that's as ethical as we can make it. And then also, internally, like our own team, making sure that they get everything that they need, making sure my family's getting what they need. But no, but I am very independent. I don't like people telling me what's right and what's wrong and what to do and what not to do. And especially when it comes to, especially when I think I naturally see problems differently than other people. And so there could be a lot of friction with leadership in my case, because I would want to solve a problem maybe differently than someone in leadership might see it, and being submissive to, so that it would be really, really challenging for me.
Yeah, what is that? Do you know where that comes from? I mean, I feel the same way, and I think for me at least is, and this happens regularly for me. I'll go out to lunch and I'll talk to someone, or I'll call someone up or whatever, and everyone has their own prescription of what's going to work, because it's worked for them or it's worked for someone else they've known in the past. And what I continue to understand, I guess, at least about myself, is that, like you, a lot of things don't resonate with me. I mean, I guess that's what it is initially. Is like, it just doesn't sound like something I want to do, or something that I first off don't think that I'm a very careless individual or reckless, or I'm very principled, right? So I'm not going to, I haven't been, ignoring a lot of things, or, blinded by whatever. And so when it comes to advice, in a lot of ways, I feel like something either resonates or it doesn't. And some of it's either hard or it's not. It's even, some of it's hard to hear and hard to digest or whatever. But I think the tension for me is that I've built everything that I've done so far basically by, my own hands and the support of a community, really, in almost every facet. And so there's like I think that's where you see my ego, I guess, get wrapped up in most of the work that I do. And I think that's the thing, the person that I am, I feel like that's my struggle, is like trying to figure out and really kind of like figure out where my ego's getting in the way and what's more important. Right. And then every time you say ego, like someone like me is just like, oh my gosh, that sucks. I don't want to have that. But is there something for you that you've identified that creates that initial tension?
Well, I think there are facets to like everyone, and what I mean, or why I'm setting that up, is because I think there can I think every conversation, every criticism, every person is worth listening to, because even when, even when they might be underqualified to talk about it, or they might be wrong about other things, it doesn't mean that they're wrong about everything.
Yeah.
And so, I try to be very, very open-minded to everyone, even if you just said something that I vehemently, whether it's personal, like it's political or religious or whatever, like, even though you've said something here that is I very much disagree with, it doesn't mean that the next thing that we talk about, or that, is wrong. You can't write something completely off. There are facets to people. So I guess, no, I'm not. I'm very actually open to, but when I know, and I'm very much trust. It doesn't mean that my choices are perfect, or that the choice I'm making right then is going to be the right one. But I do like having to kind of live and die by my judgment based on these things.
That's good.
And being the judge of those. And there's a lot of pressure with it also, especially when you have a team that's depending on you. You have a family that's depending on you to not make those choices wrong. I mean, there is something very, very nice in my mind about it being someone else's problem, and I can just collect a paycheck. And by the way, probably collect a much bigger paycheck than I'm currently collecting. But there is just a part about the freedom and the autonomy, and the one that gets to kind of have the final say. And I really don't think it's ego. I think it's just preference and awareness that I see the things differently than other people, and that's okay. But then I have affirmation from others, So it's not just like overnight I've made these decisions. It's like a slow building. There's affirmation from lots of people that say, hey, you do see the world differently, and we appreciate that about you. Like, do more of that. Do more of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think at times, folks, entrepreneurs, creatives, or whatever, are sometimes misunderstood because we have this confidence in things unseen, or things that are kind of felt, if you will, kind of like something that feels to most analytical people as like, I don't know, like kind of art. It's just not you can't articulate it, and so we have this
vision and confidence.
Vision, confidence, things that just, I think, in a lot of ways set us apart and make us great for a lot of different things in this world. But I think sometimes I'm searching. It's kind of weird, but like you, I feel like we're old enough now to not doubt ourselves as much anymore. I mean, I still doubt myself all the time, but I'm thankful for the years of being able to do what I've done to get to a place to where I feel fairly confident about, the choices that I'm making, or at least what I've put into the world up until this point. If Tyler's story is hitting home, that's the tension that we sit in all the time. The emotional and financial swings, the pressure to chase scale, the pull to serve followers and algorithms instead of doing real work that actually serves people. You do not have to figure this out alone. For 13 years, this community has gathered for summit events in Memphis, Seattle, and Brooklyn. This spring, we're back in Seattle for Creative Works West, April 30th through May 2nd at the Cornish Playhouse at Seattle Center. It's 3 days of honest, candid talks about what it's like to have a creative career right now. Hands-on workshops to sharpen your craft, and real connections with real creatives from across the country who know exactly what this roller coaster feels like. No hype, no influencer energy, just people who care about the work and care about each other. And this year, we've rolled back ticket prices to make sure the right folks are in the room. You can learn more and grab a pass at creativeworks.co/west. I think the thing that I doubt is not the person that I think I should be. It's the person that I've chosen to be, right? It's like, I feel like I'm more of a minister than a businessman, right? Like, I'm more of a person who wants to and cares about people, their well-being, than I do my bottom line at times. That's why Creative Works was a nonprofit. It's probably going to be a nonprofit again. Not probably, it is. It's just I don't have the money to hire the people to form it in that way anymore. But I guess the gist is I'm always doubting the choices I made and when I made them. I can't do anything about that now, but I always am thinking about, well, man, if I were to have just made this decision a few months later, a few months earlier, if I would have just saved that money, like, I think that's where my doubt creeps in. And maybe it's just I don't have a way of accepting. I know I'm not an idiot, so I don't have a way of accepting some of those mistakes or some of the things.
Well, I
that
have
I've done in my
shame.
life.
Yeah, no, I have embarrassment and I have shame. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not, yeah, I have, I guess doubt and how I'm thinking about it is and maybe this is just a strength that I have that I don't know where it comes from, but, um, you can only make the best decision. You know what I mean? Like you can only use the tools that you have, whether that's your personal experiences or the network around you or the finances, or you only can do so much. And, you just have to make the best choice that you can within those parameters, you know? And so whenever I make, choices now, I do feel, um, like, okay, I'm just gonna, I feel very loose that I can just make a choice and not have to doubt it. Now that said, I do have choices that I've made that I feel embarrassment about, like, cause I mismanaged money or mismanaged a team, like in some way, or, you know what I mean? So
Sure.
there's guilt and shame and all that still for sure. But I also try to practice like the graciousness of like, I, you can only, there's a lot asked of me to be right about. I can't be right about it all, but I can try to make the best choice with the resources that I have right now, whether it's personal experience or, um, otherwise.
Yeah, and I think everyone's looking for. I mean, everyone is in such a desperate, vulnerable position. And I say everyone; it's not everyone, but a lot of people are in such desperate and vulnerable positions that they're just looking for truth all the time, right? It's
Yeah.
like, and influencers in particular, or and LinkedIn, they're offering it, right? Instead of what I buy into more often than not is, I could listen to 10 people on stage at a conference, or 10 reels from an influencer, and kind of pick and choose from kind of like what resonates with me and what I think would work well. But being formulaic, I guess, about any path and any one action or any one way to run a business, like we're talking about, I think is somewhat problematic, because it's just not going to work the same way for everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
yeah,
it won't. I think
yeah,
to play devil's advocate, I think there are lots of tools though that are like that a lot of the talking heads can bring that can add a lot of value. Just like reflection and like the reviewing process. Like, creatives oftentimes want to charge ahead and they always want to kind of move forward. And I'm certainly guilty of this. And in fact, I just talked about it in my newsletter recently, and just coming to the realization slowly that, you know, pushing forward or moving forward isn't always progress. Sometimes,
yep,
the best progress you can make is not doing anything and reflecting and, creating a plan for your success. Oftentimes people that are especially driven more by emotional or conviction or feeling or vision, like they can really, burn themselves out that way. And so I've definitely learned a lot by, I've had consultants before and friends who kind of given me advice, and practicing that advice. And they're not selling me something in the same way that you're
right.
talking about with like the talking heads, but, there is value there. But I think, um,
No,
that's,
I think that's really good. I really do. Like, yeah, I'm definitely a person who leads with conviction. Whenever I'm stuck or not moving, I feel like my world is, like I feel like I have zero value. You know, like the most exciting time for me is like when I launch a new conference, and it's like literally the worst until the day of that conference. And so I go through this huge, I mean, I love connecting with people along the way, but I don't like selling things. I don't like,
Do you like managing? Because it's a lot of management and logistics.
yeah, I think I just do that naturally. I've done it for so long, right? In so many different either businesses, whether it's my, you know, my brand business that I ran for such a long time. And before that, I did a lot of things that I never put on Kickstarter, but a lot of like small kind of website related or physical product things. And I just got good at managing a lot of things at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's where that comes from. But yeah, I fall into that. I want forward momentum in my life, you know, and it's hard for me to stop and pause and reflect. And honestly, I feel like I mean, I definitely think you can speak to this too. Like, I feel like when I stop or when I pause, I'm literally no longer attractive to a sponsor. I'm no longer attractive to an attendee of something. It's like my world gets really, really small, really, really quickly when I'm not doing anything. And so for me, and it's weird, it's almost like a feed, or it's like kind of like the algorithm. It's like I got to feed this thing all the time to make it not appear, but just to make it present for people so that I can find ways to, you know, get support for the work that I'm doing. And you're right. It's exhausting. You can burn out really, really easily. And, you know, I think the thing for me at least is, you know, I'll get a card from someone or some sort of, you know, like note or email or a donation will come through and you're just like, oh, okay, this is why I do that. And then that kind of charges me up for the next few days. And then I talk to a sponsor and they're like, yeah, we're not doing anything for 2025. And oh yeah, we're not doing anything for 2026. And you're just like, oh God, what did I do with my life? You know? So, yeah, it's really difficult. Different kind of, you know, building community is a different kind of business.
One of the experiences that broke me was before the Kickstarter that we talked about earlier. You know, I told you my path. I would start off doing all these gig posters and really getting into that. And then getting into the brand design. And I really had my eyes all over the brand community or the design community. And I had my heroes and I had the path. And I started kind of drawing out a path for myself. Like, who was I going to be? And how would I be defined in the creative arts world? And I was working at a coffee shop. I was doing freelance work. I went on full-time freelance. And then my wife and I got pregnant, or my wife got pregnant. And she was about 7 months pregnant. And a friend said, hey, there's a job opening at the Southern Seminary here in Louisville. You know, it's a creative job. They're looking for someone. And there was nothing I wanted to do least than working for the Southern Seminary. But they showed that, you know, they showed me how much I was getting paid, which was more than I had ever been paid before, because I'd never been paid to be a creative before. And then there was like full insurance, and that the insurance would take on Noelle, even though that she was pregnant before I got the job. And there was just all signs pointed to taking the job. It was just obviously the most responsible and the best thing I could do for Noelle. And, and so I took the job, and I literally, I felt like I was, what's the right way? I was so embarrassed by working there. And I was so, and even though I am a Christian, institutionally, I don't align with it. And I was terrified that I would be exposed as, you know, this not really cool, gritty designer, artist guy, but, you know, the graphic designer for one of the most, you know, buttoned up, Christian institutions in the world. And so I just lived in agony about that. And it really broke me in a good way, because I had eventually had to accept, like, this is what I have to do right now. And, you know, this is what's best for my family. And it ended up being what was best for me creatively, believe it or not, because of a lot of the things we talked about already, which is I was having to start to build systems and processes to my design work because it was institutional, and I had to kind of go through different processes and learning different tools. I became very good at InDesign by working there, and now InDesign is one of the main tools that I use for all design. And so all that to say, like, I put a lot of my identity and a lot of my hope in what all these unknown people thought of me as a creative, and the idea that I was tarnishing that was really, really, and I had to kind of give it up eventually and just be like, no, like, I cannot care what other people think. I have to make decisions that are right for me, and I have to make decisions that my conscience is clear about. And if they don't line up with other people's perception of me or line up with other people's what people want out of me, like, that is not my responsibility. And no one was asking me to carry that responsibility, but I was kind of just putting it on myself. And I think before then I was a very big people pleaser, and someone that wanted to, I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. And yeah, I know. Back to your therapy comment. I don't know. So in my life, I was at an Asterisk Studio Invisible Creature, and I felt like I got that whole like
indie
top of the mountain, indie kind of like, my stuff's in their book. We were published, and a lot of my work was like published on blogs and stuff. So I felt like I got this whole thing. And then when I moved back to Memphis in 2007, I actually worked for a church or two different churches for the next 4 years to get health insurance for my wife and I, and then son. And I wasn't really bothered by that work either, because what I would do is I would leave like right at 4:30 or right at 5 o'clock, and I'd go home and do a ton of freelance work and basically double my income. And I did that for like a long time, and that was incredible. And that kind of took care of the identity part. But yeah, I don't know exactly what I'm getting to there. It's just that I found myself, I was thinking about this morning, and, I found myself in this groove to where like now we're old enough to know what's important in life. And the things that are important to me are that I am like a good person to other people. Right. And then I like serve other people, and I can improve other people's position, or their career or their craft, or just give them the space to talk. I'm not a licensed therapist, so, you can't trust that side of what, I do, but I've got a lot of experience, talking to creatives and working creatively. And so, when the money's not there, I mean, just like you're saying this, everyone's saying this right now, the money's not there, or at least the way it was for most of the people that I talk to these days. I think to myself, well, what do? Do you just hang this up? I'm looking for work. It's not like I wouldn't take a job or a full-time job and work and say yes for someone, but it's like the work's not coming in, the jobs aren't coming in. And there's a part of me that like, I think maybe my dad would say that I'm being kind of careless because I won't become an electrician and just go, completely pick a different path and make a ton of money. But for me, at least, I feel like I'm trying to continue to serve, and I don't want people like me to just go away because everyone's in a tight place, So I don't know, it's funny, like between what you said initially and what I responded with, and then the Zach knocking, and then this, I'm not exactly sure at what point I'm getting at, but you just have a lot of wisdom, I think, confidence in some of these areas. And I think a lot of us feel in some weird way now, especially those of us that are older, that, life doesn't seem like it's as malleable as it once was, just because of the amount of bills that we have. I think a lot of us are looking for not necessarily truth, but direction, and trying to figure out exactly like what's the best path forward. And I would say the best path forward is like paying your bills and figuring out ways to get that done. It totally is. My hope for all of us too is that we won't all start to get into that mode, because a lot of us who want to serve and give back and help love on people and build community kind of go away too, you know?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I think that if you're going to be like untethered to like a traditional path, then you have to be willing to constantly change and shift and grow. And it is going to be different all the time. And you got to be really, really flexible. And you have to be humble enough to make changes and to work in new spaces and to take on new responsibilities and do jobs you don't want to do. So yeah, I don't think you can be stiff-necked in that in the creative arts world right now. I think you've got to be really, really moldable and flexible. And I've had to do that, and I can, as someone that's doing that. Like, I mean, for instance, like so miscellaneous goods, to kind of bring it back to that as kind of like a framework, start off with the playing cards, went into leather goods, got into ceramics, got into all these different categories and all these different spaces. And then now I'm in fragrance, and that's our main category. And I really love where we're at in fragrance, and I really love what I'm learning and what we're designing and how we're connecting with customers. But that is, that's a very different place than when we started, which was like printed playing cards. And that was a process and a journey of figuring out how to run a sustainable business. And so part of it was passion that drove us, and then part of it was practicality. A part of me wishes that, if I had been stiff-necked, then we would have stayed doing the path that I was doing in 2015 and 16 and 17, which is continually growing and launching new products all the time and getting good response, but not kind of like an overwhelming response that actually creates like sustainable. So now, I wish that we could do those things still. And I wish I could design a new mirror or clothing or all these different things, but I have to be humble enough and moldable enough to know that the business requires this of me. And so now I need to put my whole energy into that. And, but what's great is now we're getting some real traction, and we're getting, really great, customer interactions, and we're getting, tons of support. It's just like now the sustainability part is happening, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like now there's a new part of my work that I can start enjoying. So that instead of like the constant innovation, the constant creating and always designing and making new things, researching and designing, like instead of doing that all the time, which was kind of like pushing a boulder up the hill and then going back down and pushing it up, or like pushing it down and then pushing it up again. Like we're actually creating like a theme that's like, it's less hard work and more, enjoying the work. So, and this is the best my work has ever felt from like a healthy and like sustainable standpoint. But there were times that were romantically really nice, like 5 or 6 years ago, when I was in constant innovation and creating stage. But that's not sustainable. Like I keep using the word sustainable because it's relevant, but like I'm 42 now. I don't want to work, 100 hours for a 20-hour paycheck. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to do that anymore. Like I want to work the right amount and get, the payment for that work.
How long ago did you get into fragrance? Because I remember the leather. I remember all of these things. And I guess I don't know kind of like the timelines of when your product lines changed. Like how long ago did you make that shift? And it sounds like you're now hitting a groove, or when did you hit that groove?
The fragrance part of miscellaneous goods started actually in 2015, so quite a while ago. But it didn't really start taking off until maybe 1 or 2 years ago. So like the introduction to fragrance, I never wore fragrance. I was never like a connoisseur of smells. But I went to a trade show in Los Angeles, and I met this really amazing perfumist named Sarah McCartney. And this is kind of like one of the silver lining things. The actual trade show was a bust, so we actually ended up losing money on the trip. But then I met this really, really amazing woman, and she really sold me on the process of designing smells. 1 second. I don't know why I'm out of breath all of a sudden. She really just really sold me on this concept. And so from that point, I started designing our first fragrance, which was Underhill. And I used her to do all the mixing and formulation. And we went back and went through 13 iterations before we landed on the first one that we really, really believed in. And we still use that same formula to this day. And then, but I launched it actually as a solid cologne first. And this kind of goes back to that stubbornness, talking about stubbornness, that
kind of
not
waxy.
Wanting to be, I didn't want to be generic. I didn't want to just have a bottle with fragrance in it. I wanted to do something that had this design forward and really creative. And so I went through this really elaborate design process to design a wooden container that could slide open with magnets and had this insert puck with wax. And it's really cool. It's very design forward. And we just sold it like that for 2 or 3 years. And then we realized, hey, maybe there's more opportunity here. And then we started doing them as roll-ons and then deodorant. And then it wasn't about till 2.5 years ago that we were like, maybe we should try it in a more traditional format and do sprays. And we started kind of getting into that, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago. But then it wasn't until 18 months ago that we're like, you know what? This is the part of the business that we need to be focusing completely on. And so we spent all of last year pretty much transitioning the brand and slowly sunsetting our other products. There's still a few of them on our website, but we've been slowly just kind of pulling everything back, and all of our talking, all of our language, all that goes towards fragrance now.
Nice. Yeah. I'm guessing the margins, if we're talking business, the margins are just really there at the moment. For that
things
sort of thing, what?
Yeah. The things that I've noticed that are most important to creating a sustainable, let's say online business is, one is, yes, margins. How much does it cost you to make to what you charge it for? So that's got to be good. And then, your average order value. So how much do people spend when they come to your website? And then 3 is, what is your returning customer rate? So, you can imagine for playing cards and leather goods, your margin is pretty good. It's not bad, but it's not great. Your average order value is pretty good. It's not great. And then your returning customer rate is terrible because people
make something well.
Yeah, you make a good wallet. They're 10 years later, they're like, I love your wallet. We've had people come up to us 10 years later and be like, I still carry this wallet around. I love it. And we love that, of course.
Yeah.
But how do we settle that person again? And so then we started trying to make more leather goods and more styles. And it was just it was so hard to pull that customer back and get them to do a second purchase. And then we started realizing with the fragrance, hey, someone would buy something, this week, and then they're going to order it again in 2 months. And then it compounds,
Sure.
So the margins are good. The average order value is good. And then the returning customer rate is great. And so we focus really on creating unique fragrances that stand alone and have their own spot in a pretty crowded space so that people can't get them from anywhere else.
I had your Underhill deodorant for a good little bit, and it was really fantastic. We talked previously, in our emails about the emotional cost of doing this, right? You've been doing this for 10 plus years. And you've got brick and mortar, you've got employees, you've got a large family. Being an entrepreneur, it's not for everyone. I think that's one of the things I want to say out loud, because I think a lot of people see someone like yourself, or they see me, or they see another person doing something. They're like, well, that's the path. I think
they can romanticize it.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a certain kind of person that can stomach all of this stuff, and then there are others that it's just not a good fit for. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It means it's not the best fit. What's been the kind of the cost there for you, and just like, I mean, you seem like you're super level headed and stuff. What are those things for you over the last 10 years that have really kind of like showed themselves that you've been able to look at and, you know, kind of learn from?
I have a unique ability to like bury emotion, and then sometimes I let it come back out, and then I'll kind of manage it when it comes back out. But like I have like a pretty tight hand on the release valve. I do take it as a compliment though, and like Zach, who works for me, is he tells me you're never too high, you're never too low. And
Yeah, that's great.
I do take that as a compliment. When we get a big win, I'm not opening the champagne. I'm celebrating it. I'm saying this is great. Good job, everybody. But then when we take a huge loss, which we have taken huge losses, like, I'm not agonizing over it either. I don't know. I think you do. I'm not saying it's the healthy thing to do, but I do think it is a great tool for the kind of work that I'm in, which is constantly up and down. People want to praise you and celebrate you, and then people want to tear you down. By people, I don't mean like publicly or socially, but like, whatever it is, whatever is happening. And so it's a good skill for me to have that. I'm glad that I have that skill. But if you are sensitive, it's a very up and down world. We had, this might be sharing too much, but I'll share it anyways. In November, we had like $110,000 in our bank account. And then like the beginning of November, and by the end of November, we had $30,000 in our bank account. Those are the type of like swings that can happen. It's just like, okay, now we got to build that back up, and then you build it back up, and then you got to, something happens, or, and then you see the swing happens again. And, just managing that. If I started a business again, like if I started started all over, I would definitely do it with partners. I've done this all, with the help of my team, but from the start, been building it on my own, taking all the risks on my own. And I think, having that kind of divvied out between, other people would be really helpful.
Sure.
I don't think I'm answering your question yet. What was your question?
No, you are. I mean, it's just basically trying to figure out the kind of the emotional ups and downs for you as an entrepreneur, and that emotional cost. But I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, you're coming to the table with a really unique, ability to kind of compartmentalize the emotion, or at least level it in a way. I think you said it differently, but just to keep it more even, which I think is really fantastic, because you're also.
I did develop a stomach ulcer though, so like. There's physical implications for not letting too much of it out.
Yeah, and you're also probably dealing with the emotions of your employees, your customers and reviewers and things like that. So I think that's a really amazing skill to just basically be, what's the best word for this? But just you're able to kind of be stoic in the midst of a lot of, ups and downs and things like that. I think that's really amazing. I used to be like that when I was a kid. People used to say that I would watch a lot and not really do much. But then there was like a turn in my life, and I don't know exactly when that was, but then it was just like, I just turned into this person where I was like, I want to talk. I want to be heard. I want to, I want to say something.
We got to figure out when that moment in your personal history is, because I think it's going to explode. We're going to do psychoanalysis. We're going to figure out, where did that start with you? This all begins there.
I know, man. And that's the thing too, is like, I mean, everyone is coming at their creative practice or their entrepreneurial, their job, their life, with some sort of emotional baggage or some story, right, that gets them to where they are. and has them react and build the things that they want to build or take the jobs that they want to take. I feel like I get kind of stuck in this weird principled world or constitution or whatever it is that I've built up around myself, that keeps me, and right now, as we all know, this is not a great time in our country, society, whatever. I don't know if you think about this stuff a lot, but like, it's hard to figure anything out right now, I think, because you're just not dealing, like the world doesn't react the same way it reacted just, a year ago or 16 months ago or whatever you're putting around that. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree completely, 100%. We live in a very different world, even the last 12, 18 months than we did the previous. And that was a different world than the previous 18 months. It does feel like there's just a lot changing all the time. It doesn't look like it's slowing down. But that's out of my control. So kind of going back to having grace, with yourself and other people is doing the best you can with what you got. And what you have in a month might be different than what you have today. It might be much less, it might be much more, but doing the best with whatever that is, I think that's all you can do. And then having grace. You're not going to be perfect. Other people aren't going to be perfect. And so much of life's joy doesn't come from, for instance, like, my wife and I, we're going to be celebrating 20 years in October. When we first got married, we were so broke, so broke. In many ways, those were some of the best years, of our lives. And so as far as just, it was fun. We had a lot of fun in our early marriage. We have fun now. It's very different. But the point I'm trying to make is that, the security that I'm seeking now, I didn't have then. The finances that I have now, I didn't have then. So like, where does life's like best moments come from? It's so you got to be gracious. You got to kind of take it as it comes. Never be too high, never be too low. Just be ready for the next thing. Make the best decision with it, and also having like a realization that, okay, I tell my kids this because now I'm watching them go through hard things, whether it's at school or in the neighborhood or whatever. I see them see the world or experience things or whatever. I think, and I've told them this, the least, because they have friends. Sorry, one more caveat. They have friends that are from wealthier communities or go to like private schools or have more sheltered lives, have parents that buy whatever they want for them or whatever it is. And I tell them like the least, and when you get my age, the least interesting people in the room are the people that haven't been challenged, haven't had hardships, haven't had difficulties. Those are the least interesting people. And who are the most interesting people are the people that like, or to reference podcasts. I don't know if you listen to How I Built This, but this is a great, wonderful entrepreneurial, like, journalistic style podcast. And there's people on it sometimes that kind of round into their money, like right away. And they have the boringest, like the stories suck. And then you have like the guy from Stonyfield Farm who like basically had an insane survival story of getting his business off the ground. And he's the most interesting, insightful, wise person. And that, so, those are the things that he gathered from the hardship. I don't like wish hardship on my kids. I don't wish hardship on myself, but I know that some of my best parts kind of came from going through hard things. And so I can't really, I don't want to do too much to try to just like, I don't know, to act like they shouldn't, or like that it's abnormal when they happen. Like they're going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. And the other thing I just keep thinking about too is, and I can't remember exactly which conference this was, maybe it was 2018, but you spoke from stage. And when you spoke, you basically shared your,
I was so nervous. Oh my gosh. No, it was not. It was don't. You don't have to be. It was noticeable, and I was so. What's amazing is I actually do really well. Like I do really well one on one, and I can actually like up to like 10, 12 people in a room. I can like really own the room and like speak very confidently and clearly. But when you start getting into like 20 people or 30, and then in the case of this, like 200 people,
Yeah. Oh, that would have been like 300 and something people.
Yeah.
So it even more like
it was.
But you did so great. You really did.
Okay.
You did so great. And I think the thing that I remember about it is you literally kind of like went through your constitution. You outlined the things that mattered to you and your principles and your values. But I wondered, you know, kind of fast forwarding now, like what are the things that continue to kind of like what are the principles you continue to have and use every single day in your business and your life that kind of keep you, I mean, maybe that's what keeps you easy. Maybe that's what keeps you level. That's a better way of saying it. But do you kind of like, are you consistently kind of going back to those things? You probably operate out of them naturally, but I'd love to hear what those things are for you on a regular basis that you're coming back to.
Was don't chase the glory, work hard and be satisfied. And that was the kind of, that was the theme of my whole talk. And I still very much believe those. And I think 10 years later, 11 years after I've done that talk, I still very much believe those are the core of everything, which is the glory is fleeting. It's not even really there. Anyone that actually ever gets the glory isn't satisfied by it. So quit chasing it. It's not going to make you happy. It's not going to fill that hole. And so what does that mean? That means you can really just enjoy the now. You know, you don't have to enjoy the potential future with all your glory and fandom and whatever it is. You can enjoy the today, and that stuff doesn't matter. You don't have to chase it. But don't let that, you know, prevent you from working hard. Like working hard is good in and of itself. Like the satisfaction of doing hard work is worth living for. It's just it brings life to you, but it also brings life to the people it impacts. In my case, it brings life to my team because when I work hard, we do better. Just like when they work hard, we do better. And everyone wins. And, you know, it also helps because it makes my family, you know, supports my family. But then it also has all these other ripples where it provides like a different perspective on design or fragrance for someone. And then that has ripples, you know what I mean? And so just doing good work is just good. It's just good. So you should do good work. And be satisfied. I think that kind of goes back to, what I was talking about before, which is like having grace for other people and for yourself. And know that maybe something isn't the best it could be, you know, but you got to practice grace for yourself. And I think in the process of practicing grace, you have to practice satisfaction. Like, yeah, it's not perfect, but I'm going to be satisfied with it. My kids could have done a better job on this, but I'm going to be satisfied with it. You know, like, you know, now there's a challenge there. And this is how I would push back against it is to like argue with myself. I'm thankful for, just to pick a generic person like Steve Jobs, who was an absolute perfectionist and demanded perfection. And I'm glad that people like that exist. And I'm glad that there's certain people that really are completely owning and, you know, changing the way that we see things and doing it in such abrupt and fantastic ways. And so I don't think though the whole world needs to be like me, but I think from what I've seen from my own, like the value that I add and the value that I feel, it's from those three principles.
Yeah, man. And then that's the thing too. A friend tells me all the time because I feel like I'm different. And he's like, yeah, you are different, man. You got to realize not everyone's like you. And I think he's coming from more of a standpoint of like, I wear my emotions or my heart on my sleeve and I'm very passionate and outspoken about a lot of things. And I think to a lot of people, that's kind of tiring, right? It's just like too much at times. And he was like, yeah, man, but like, we need people like you. It's not, if everyone was like you, yes, it would be exhausting, but we need people like you
Yeah, I agree with that.
To balance out.
I have a few friends like that, or I'm like,
yeah,
I don't need to see an Instagram story about X. But
yeah,
that said, I don't want no one to be, you know what I mean? Like, I want that
yeah,
person to be doing that at the same time.
totally. You know? Yeah. And yeah. Are there, like, with online and stuff? I mean, I kind of, a part of this podcast is just talking about the state of things and kind of where things have gone from kind of inception of your career to now. What are the things that you feel like, you were talking a little bit about, or we were talking a little bit about talking heads and, Instagram, Reels and, things on LinkedIn and stuff like that. What are the things that you feel like technology wise that we're getting right? And then what are the things that maybe some of the things that you don't feel like we're getting right? You and what you've been building has been completely analog, to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of people these days would be like, well, why aren't you getting into the digital space? You should be doing that. It seems like a mistake or whatever. And what it is, what are the things that you feel like maybe, what are the things that you're seeing and the things that you kind of gravitate to in this space of changing so quickly?
Well, I think all creatives should be practicing AI, and I mean that genuinely. I think it's if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it for you, and so I think there's a lot to be excited about with AI. I think it's, like with like project management and like, dude, I use it so much for like managing my plate of work and like managing my projects and giving me structures and giving me, because I'm not a very structured person. So I'll like just kind of like give it a lot of information about, what I'm trying to do. And then it'll kind of give me a path to do that. And it's not gospel, but it's a good starting point for me to kind of use my own brain and to kind of build. So I think there's lots of ways that we should be using AI. And I think there's lots of ways that are scary about it. So I think that would be my answer is like, AI for both. Like, I think it's really exciting space and there's a lot to kind of like use, that can really benefit the creative. But then the scary part is that it is also like a Pandora's box, and that, it's when it's out and it's in its full form, like, you will have work afterwards,
Right.
But I will say in the moment, like with what we know now, I think the people that are already leaders in the creative and arts and space should be using it to magnify their strengths so that they can still be kind of the captains of those ships, opposed to resisting it and letting other people kind of overtake them in that leadership position. You know what I mean?
Rather, because maybe they can afford to be louder or have more time to invest.
Or they're using AI.
That's what I mean.
Like they're using a tool that's like magnifying their less good voice. And so
that's right.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same? It's kind of weird that we're talking about AI, and I know that algorithms are just large language models in themselves, but do you feel the same way about social media? I mean, it's kind of weird. It's like there's something really great about social media, or at least initially there was.
There was, for sure. But now it's too commercial. It's all about feeding the machine. It's not about actual community and expression. So I don't use it. I don't use it very much for community anymore. But there was a golden age of Twitter when there was genuine connection, community, trading of ideas, supporting of ideas. I think it was around that time we were talking about earlier, like 2009 to like 2015 was just really, really fun. And I actually made a lot of the friends that I have today through that channel. But now it's just a machine. It's everyone's trying to get richer and they need to support the loudest, most Yeah. And so I do have to play that game also.
Yeah, that's
But
what
I
I was going
think,
to ask.
and I have to, and I don't mind it in the sense that it's still just an expression of work. But I'm, I think we're gonna pull back and get more focused and do less of that and better content. Um, I think we'll see.
Yeah, I continue to think that there will be, people call it a bubble or whatever, but I just there's so much that's online that's not true. That to stay online, I think, at least in the future, is going to seem like you don't like to live in reality, and that's going to make a lot of people mentally unwell. You could
Already
probably say
happening.
that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like you could say that now, but I think it's going to be unignorable going into the future. And a lot of people are going to make some concessions about where they spend their time, or draw some lines in the sand about where they spend their time. And I feel like, and I hope that, we go back to those times where, if I want to figure out what you're doing, I'm going to sign up for your newsletter and I'm going to go to your website.
It's kind of like a cycle we've seen throughout time where, there's neighborhoods within a city, and like first people that move into those are like scrappy, creative artists, entrepreneurial type people who kind of come and they make a community in a neighborhood and they kind of make it cool. And then people with money start to realize, and they want to put in, an expensive restaurant, and they want to do this and that. And then that neighborhood all of a sudden becomes, a shadow of itself from a community standpoint, but then it's a lot more glossy and glittery, and,
Right.
and it's still, it's still a decent place to go, and you want to go to the neighborhood still, and you like some of the restaurants or whatever, and it's very walkable. But then all those people kind of get displaced to another neighborhood and they do the same thing, and you see this kind of happening over and over again. I think a similar thing could be, attributed to what we're seeing in like the social media space. What I'm interested in is what's the new neighborhood. Where do
Right.
artists and creatives and entrepreneurs and, and people that aren't those things, but like people that just want genuine interactions, like where do they go to kind of feed that online community? Maybe it is newsletters and podcasts and Reddits and, but it'd be great if there was another tool like on a Twitter level that was like kind of promoting that.
I also just hope that we have more, more spaces built for in-person interaction, and we have the ability, and the funds to, make those. I mean, we've talked about kind of having you out at the conference, and how much of a trek that is, how expensive that is, how much you have to take off of work for that, how much you have to take time away from your family. And then if you're not making an X amount of dollars or whatever, and not that it always comes down to money, but it's just like it's a huge expense for anyone at any level these days to like basically not leave the house. I mean, my hope is that whether it's hyper local or whether conferences come back in some way, and maybe they're not a traditional conference as we know them now, I hope that we'll make time and more time for real interactions, because I feel like that's where people, see other people in real life that are like themselves. I mean, I remember all the folks like Salem Boardca. Like I'm trying to think about all the folks that you interacted with, some of them probably for the first time, back in 2015 when you were in our market. And if you're friends with them now, some of these folks like the parks folks, Keymaster Games, and the parks folks met at one of our markets, and they went on to do the 59 parks or whatever that thing is. Yep. But it's gorgeous, and I think it's in Target, right? And so it's like their business has gone bananas. And yes, you can make those connections online, but I don't know, man. Maybe I'm nostalgic, but I don't want us to be Ready Player One just yet. I want to find ways to continue to, help real people meet real people and talk about real work that's happening in real life with real families and real everything. So, well, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time, man. I'm glad that we're still connected. I feel like you're one of those folks that I can definitely reach out to and get a good word from. Where can people find you these days online?
Yeah, Miscellaneous Goods Co. So it's misc-goods-co.com. That's where we're making and putting out most of our work. But yeah, on Instagram too, which even though we just kind of shit on it a little bit, still on Instagram, still posting on there every once in a while.
Yeah,
Enjoying it while I can. Yeah, those are the places.
good, man. Well, Tyler, thanks for making time for us, and hopefully we'll see you sooner than later.
Of course, Josh. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right, later.
All right, bye.
Thanks for listening to State of the Union. If this episode helped and made you feel a little less alone, I would love for you to share it with a friend or your team and leave a rating or review. It helps more creatives find these conversations and helps us to keep going. If you're looking for a community that reflects the world we live in and not just the loudest voices online, come hang with us in real life this spring in Seattle at Creative Works West. Registration link is in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Thanks for caring about people as much as you care about the work and for staying in it even when it's uncomfortable. Got a story about a win, a setback, or a shift you're navigating in your creative career? Send it to stories@creativeworks.co. I'd love to hear it and maybe share it on a future episode. State of the Union is produced by Creative Workers Union, hosted by Josh Horton, and edited by Sydney Gladue. Until next time, keep showing up, focus on your craft, and remember, you are not alone.